Welcome back to another episode of the E30 M3 Factory Restoration. My name is Frank Macalusa from Garageaholic, and if you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and like, because we got a lot of cool videos coming up in January into February as we deliver this thing in April. But anyway, what we got today is we're going to be bringing the M3 into our bay right here where you see my E31 S85. More info on that coming in April. But we're going to be bringing that M3 in, we're going to be getting it up on stilts, and we're going to start our reconstruction, starting with wiring harness installation and gas tank and all that underbody stuff that we need to do. So guys, stay tuned. We got a lot of cool stuff in this episode. You don't want to miss it. The M3 is officially back, and this project is going to start rolling real fast. We got all the parts we need, we got all the components. We got the bumpers, we got the doors, the fenders, we got the moonroof, the hood, the trunk lid, and its Evo spoiler, and we've got all of the trim pieces. So now it's a matter of making sure that this thing sits in the right spot in the garage so that we can get it up on jack stands, and that's where it will stay until we can roll it around and get that S14 in it. But for now, we need to get this thing up in the air. We need to fix this wiring harness, get that installed, get rid of the old front and rear subframes, and start getting all this new equipment back on. Now you got to remember, when you're dealing with a freshly painted car and all of these parts lying around, that invites a lot of opportunity to nick things and scratch things. So thank you so much to LJC Jr. and his paint shop for offering to do a full-on polish, cut and buff again before delivery of this car in April. So having said all of that, we are going to start doing a disassembly and then rebuild. We're going to start with the subframes, and we start getting some of the underbody painted as well. I think that's it. I mean, we got a lot of cool stuff in this episode, so you don't want to miss it, guys. Stand by. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, why am I being so rough with this suspension? And why do I not care about it very much? And that's because everything is getting replaced here with brand new parts. The trailing arms and the subframe both of the subframes rather, are getting replaced by Garageaholic. So we have them upstairs. We're gonna be putting them in another episode. The only thing that we're keeping are gonna be these hubs. That's basically it. These 5 lug hubs are the only thing that we're gonna be replacing. And we're going to be installing them onto the new trailing arms. And of course, the suspension is going to be all brand new as well. We'll talk about that in a specific episode. And the same thing goes for the front. The only thing that we're saving here is the steering rack. We're going to be cleaning that up really good, and we're going to be saving these knuckles with these front hubs as well. We're going to be modifying these in order to fit the front coilover suspension, new subframe, new motor mounts, and new control arms. Actually, they're going to be aluminum control arms on this guy here, so we're going to be replacing those guys with new control arms as well. So now that we've got all the suspension off, and we've kind of basically everything is completely off the way it should be, we can start going on ahead and working on the underside. And let's paint the underside, and let's work on the harness. now let's redo this wiring harness before we reinstall it into the car. This here is the radio side, and I think that this is probably the most interesting part of the entire wiring harness because there is literally like happy birthday tape wrapped around each of these connections. So we're going to cut that off completely, and we're going to go with 2 slim style connectors that is going to be installed for the radio. Now the radio I'm going to show you in a later episode down the road as we start to install all of these components into the dashboard. But the way that this radio is configured, it's a Continental radio, and it has 2 wires for each speaker, whereas the factory E30 wiring only has 1 wire for each speaker, and that's because this goes into a factory amplifier, and then from the amplifier it goes out as 2 wires to each speaker. So what I'm going to do now is just clip off all of these wires and label them appropriately so that when I wire this thing later on down the road, I'll know that it's for the radio, and then I can install these guys later. I want to make sure that I have enough slack in my wiring so that it gets through the bezel of the radio and I can easily wire it up and then install it. It also gives me a little bit of time to research how to wire a 2-pole speaker into a single wire, whether it's 1 or both or splice them together. I'm not sure yet, but I'll get there. So now let's work on taping up the engine bay side of the wiring before we get this thing back into the car. So I wanted to take a break, having been about halfway through. As you can see, I have all of this still left to do, and I did this. I mean, look how clean that looks. You know, very, very nice, very professional. All of the old stuff has been removed, and all of the new stuff has been added. You can see I'm collecting a little bit of old tape. This is a really, really nice Tesa. It is a cloth tape, and it has really good adhesion properties, and it's actually not too expensive at about $3 or $4 per roll. It's going to take me about 4 rolls to do this entire harness because of all the little branching out that we have here in order to make this thing perfect. But one of the things that I found while doing this, and I'll rip this off, is that you can see that there's issues with this harness. There's some grounds here that have been cut off, or at least maybe corroded off at least. And this is a ground node here that was supposed to go out to this thing, which so yeah, we got a lot of harness issues to fix while we're unwrapping everything. We're kind of uncovering a lot of these skeletons. So I want to fix some of these wires that I found, and then continue on with the rest of the harness. But for your benefit, we'll be done with that in just a second. You'll see the completed look. And here's the garbage. So now that the harness is basically sent through the firewall, and you can see I have a plastic bag here to cover my freshly taped exterior engine bay harness, I want to take this harness and kind of route it through where it needs to go, and there's a lot of brackets and stuff underneath the steering column. I got the pedal assembly still to install, and put the brackets down along the floorboard and through the back so that it kind of guides and dictates where this harness is meant to be installed. But before I do that, I wanted to install these 2 components. The Firewall, which is a brand new Firewall component. This is, these typically break over time, so this is a brand new piece. It was very, very expensive. This one too was not cheap, and I wanted to put that exhaust heat shielding down in there too. I got some brand new hardware here that I wanted to install on it, and just kind of get it installed, and let's continue to move forward with the build. now let's just keep on cracking along with this unfinished project. And if there's anything more that I hate than an unfinished project, it's unfinished project parts that are laying on my dirty garage floor, have chances of getting stepped on, scratched, or anything else happening to it. So what we need to do is start installing some fenders, some side skirts, and we'll start working on the trunk stuff. And we're gonna be using all of these parts in order to install all of these components onto this vehicle. All right, so both fenders are now outfitted, and I think it looks pretty good. The alignment of the fenders is actually not very easy because, especially at this point, I acknowledge that I don't have the hood on in the front bumper and the grills and stuff, so that all needs to come. So I'm keeping everything a little bit fluid. But for now, I just wanted to make sure that I had the gaps on between the doors correct. And as it stands right now, the gap looks pretty darn good. The angles, the doors actually close a little bit more because it doesn't have all of the weather stripping in it, but everything seems to be lined up pretty good. Passenger side looks pretty good in terms of panel alignment. Looks pretty straight all the way through. Again, that door is kind of closed a little bit more. Yeah, looks pretty good. So now on to the side skirts. Now let's try it on the driver's side a little bit differently. Now, if you're wondering, the reason why I had marked these with stickers is to understand and identify where the pressure points are for all of those clips, because once you install that side skirt, you have no clue where they are in order to put that pressure on to get them to snap in. So that's what is there to identify. You don't want to use a marker on the brand new paint. Light stickers like this is really the best thing to do. That way, at the end, when you're done, you can just peel them right off. Now that we've finished the fenders and the side skirts, I want to tackle the bumper. So the bumper is installed with 2 sliders on either side. Once you have the sliders installed with the 8mm screws, then you want to install your shocks. Shocks are installed with 2 M10s on the back side and then 1 M8 on the side of the frame rail. Once you do that, the bumper should slide right in. Then you put your 2 M12s right onto the bumper shocks, and it should line up. Get the one side in first, and then you can pivot the other side by pushing it in just a tiny bit, get it into that bumper strip, and you're good to go. And these little guys, don't worry about these little guys. Whew, that was a lot of work, but it was rewarding work. Putting body panels on is always the best part of a rebuild. So guys, if you think I'm gonna end this video on that kind of a note, you're wrong. Of course, I'm gonna let you guys see what this whole thing looks like now that I've put the rear bumper on, the front fenders, and the side skirts. It's actually starting to look like a car. Check it out. Guys, my name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic. Welcome to the channel if you're new, and please subscribe to follow this entire build for the next couple of months as we get this thing alive!